Want to get into medical school or thrive once you're there? Meet Ms. Marsha Williams, who started her career at the University of Pennsylvania and is currently Director of Admissions at an East Coast MD school after serving in the same role at a prominent DO school. Her straight-talking wisdom has transformed countless students' medical journeys. With over 15 years of experience across MD and DO schools, Ms. Marsha has a remarkable talent for helping students discover their potential, particularly those who never saw themselves as physicians. She's nationally recognized for her diversity initiatives and pipeline programs. Known for her unflinching honesty and passionate advocacy, Ms. Marsha doesn't just get students into medical school, she helps them build the self-efficacy and resilience needed to succeed throughout their careers. Ms. Marsha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
What initially drew you to admissions work?
Well, as you mentioned in my intro, I started out at the University of Pennsylvania in nursing, and it was a really interesting position because I really didn't have to do much. I called some high school students and invited them to campus, told them a little bit about our program, and hoped that they liked what I was telling them, that they would come and join us and learn more about the programs offered at the nursing school with Penn. And I liked it. And I thought it was really, interesting how I could convince someone who may not even have been interested in nursing school to just visit the campus to see what it's about. And so, I started out doing that and I enjoyed it. So I knew that I had an interest in helping students in higher education. But as you see, I worked at the University of Pennsylvania in many different roles, and all of those roles actually helped me get to where I am today. I worked in student services and financial aid and things like that, which helped me be familiar with financial resources for students. And so even as an assistant director, associate director, director of admission, I am able to share with students, well, this is what you're eligible for as a graduate student or a medical student in federal aid and things like that, because I had those different jobs at the University of Pennsylvania. And so each job at the University of Penn helped me become who I am today. So although I had different positions at Penn, eventually when I did finally get to medical education admissions, I had all these experiences that really served as tools in a toolkit for me to really do well as an admissions representative. So
That is quite a diverse sort of background. What are things that you see, that you've learned from these different roles that are sort of typical mistakes that a student might make when choosing an institution or when enrolling?
well, what I've learned over the years is that, sometimes students are not given all the information they need to make informed decisions. And, sometimes even as admissions advisors and, guidance counselors and things of that nature, we are inclined to, not want to hurt our students' feelings. And so as a result of that, there are some people who advise students without giving them the full picture, right? And so I think what happens with some students is that they're not given all the information. And when they're not given all the information, they're not able to make informed decisions for themselves, whether that is to pursue a career in medicine, do additional work to make yourself more competitive for medical school, not do additional work and just focus on doing well on the standardized exams that you need to take in order to get into medical school, you know, just different decisions that students need to make. I think by not providing them with all of the information, they're not allowed to really make the right decision for themselves. So I do pride myself on being an honest person, being someone who's very straightforward. I always tell students sometimes when they talk to me, get the tissues, because I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to be straightforward. And sometimes, it's not always the answer they want to hear, but it is the truth, and it is the information that they need in order to make the right decision for themselves. And so sometimes that decision might be, maybe I didn't know that I had to do all of these things in order to be so competitive. I'm going to have to talk to my family and see if I can get the support that I need. Or maybe I need to rethink this and focus on clearing up my bad debt, because I do want to go to medical school and I may have to get additional uh, private loans because I've exceeded my graduate loans, just fiscal things that I have learned and I can share with students, and they say, oh, no one ever told me that, and so I give them information about that, and et cetera, et cetera. So I give students all the information so that they can make the best decision for themselves. I hope that answers your question.
No, that's fantastic. It sounds like what you do is you can see someone's blind spots and you can speak the truth to them to help them get to the next level, right? To help them see what it is that's holding them back.
I can do that. I can just provide information. Sometimes it's not necessarily a blind spot. Sometimes it's just, you know, you don't know a student's resilience. You don't know how a student can persevere. You don't know these things. You just meet a student face on, right? But you don't know their backstory. You don't know anything about them. But you do know what it takes in order to get into medical school. So you can provide them with the blueprint. They will have to determine whether or not they have the stamina to do it, because it is a marathon that you have to, complete in order to, become a physician.
So if I was a college student right now, what would be the blueprint that I should follow in order to get into medical school?
First, you need to have an interest. Everybody doesn't have an interest right away. Um, you know, and you don't necessarily have to um like blood or anything like that. I had a student tell me I couldn't stand blood. I didn't know. I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I just can't stand blood, right? So needless to say, she's a psychiatrist because she doesn't like blood. But, I asked her, well, how did you get over it? And she said, well, I volunteered at a trauma center. I was like, that's great. Now I'm going to tell every student who's afraid of blood but wants to go to medical school, they need to volunteer at a trauma center, right? Because that's how you get over it. But first, you need to have an interest in doing this, right? And more importantly, you need to be someone that recognizes it's a service, right? You're providing a service for people when they're vulnerable. People don't go to the doctor when they're feeling great. At least I know I don't, right? And so you need to recognize that you are treating people and taking care of people when they're their most vulnerable. And if you don't have empathy and those types of soft skills, then this might not be the profession for you. And once you realize that, then, you need to understand that it's a sacrifice, right? It's an investment in you, and it can be timely. And sometimes you have to also understand that if you don't get it right the first time, your mistakes are costly. And when I mean costly, it can be a lesson, a teachable moment, like, you know what? Now I know what to do. Or it can be a fiscal cost, meaning that you didn't go to college in 4 years and do what you were supposed to do academically. And that's okay, because there are redemption programs that can help you prove to an admissions committee that you have the aptitude to do the work and do medical school, but it's going to cost you. And so because of the mistakes you made in undergrad, now you have to pay for 'em, right? Literally and figuratively. So my advice is, the blueprint is do what you're supposed to do when you get there. and that is focus on your academics. You do not have to major in pre-med, but you need to do your prerequisites and do them well. You need to have balance. If you want to party, party. I went to school and I party. It's okay. But don't lose sight on your purpose. If you're going to party on Friday, make sure all your work is done Monday through Thursday, right? And then make sure that Saturday you're back to being focused on your work, right? Because you have to remember that you are there to serve a purpose, and the purpose is to go to medical school, not to party, right? But you need to have balance, because everyone needs an outlet in order to show that they're human, right? If we wanted to be treated by robots, we wouldn't need the humane side of medicine, right? So yes, stay focused on your academics, get involved so that we know that you don't always stay in the classroom and you don't always stay in your books. You're also someone who can engage with individuals and people, and you can socialize. And then make sure that this is something you've thought about and you really want to do it. You don't know what you do not like until you try it, right? So one thing I've learned from some of my students is that when they go on rotations, the first one they go on, they love it. And then the second one, they love it. And then the third one, they love it, right? And then they keep loving it and loving it and loving it. And then they finally get to the one that they don't love. They're like, okay, I know what I'm not going to do, right? So I always encourage students to shadow, volunteer in clinical environments, do whatever you can if this is what you truly want to do, so that you know that this is truly what you want to do. And then always seek the guidance of admissions professionals. Reach out to schools that you're interested in. The admissions office is the face of the university. And if you feel that you're not getting what you need from that institution, then that's what you're going to get from that institution. Okay. All right. I don't know what else to say.
No, this is great. So, what would you say? So, one thing that I'm curious about is that I heard you say, it's like you should try it. Try these things. Go do rotations. In large part so that you can know, is this something that I'm willing to make the sacrifices for? Is this the kind of thing that I really want to do for the rest of my life? How, from an admission standpoint, how important are those experiences, like the volunteer experiences and things like that, in evaluating a candidate for admissions?
Yeah. Well, you have to think about the institutions where you're applying. A lot of it just depends. A lot of institutions that may be heavily research focused want students that have research experiences, right? Because that's important to them. Academic medicine is important. Not to say that everything else is not important. Do not get me wrong. But you have to know where you're applying. There are some institutions that what's really important to them is what you do for the community. Your selflessness, your community engagement, the things that are happening outside of the classroom. What are you doing for others selflessly? And that's more important than being published, right? So you have to know where you're applying. Um, so my advice is know your institution. If you're going to apply to a school that is and I'm just using this as an example, in a rural area that is focused on rural medicine and, you know, does a lot of community service, then you may want to have some rural community experiences on your application. Um, so you need to know where you're applying. Yeah.
So it sounds like That was going to be my next question, which is like, how would I know, right? I mean, I can imagine famous schools, like the really prominent schools, like I went to Stanford for med school, like are
Which
more
is the
research
top
focused.
research one institution. They're going to want researchers, right? You look at the applicant pool, you look at the incoming class. There should be some statistical data on the website about their matriculate. And again, if the institution does not have that, it really makes you question certain things. Um, but all institutions should present that information, because how would you know to apply? There are information books, like the AAMC has the MSAR, which gives you the MD matriculation requirements, MD admission requirements for MD schools. And then the DO schools have an information book. So you can get the information for each school's um, through their governing application bodies. For DO schools, it's the ACOMAS, and for MD schools, it's AMCAT. And you can find out what each school looks for in an applicant in each of those application sites. So the information is definitely out there.
And so for that information, is that just like the basics of like what classes they need, or does it also include the like, well, we typically see in our applicants that they have
And
at
it
least
does.
three
And it
research textbooks?
absolutely. And it'll even say our average MCAT is, our average GPA is. And that's key as well. Because a lot of students, when they're applying, they'll ask me, oh, Ms. Marsha, should I apply here, here, or here? Because, of course, I'm a realist. You never want to apply to one school. And, of course, I want you to come to my school, right? Because I'm here. And I'm going to give you all the love and affection you need, because I want to support you, right? But guess what? I'm a realist. You're not going to always get into my school. So I always tell students, apply, to other schools that align with your profile, right? And so when they're looking at these institutions, you have to see, does it say average or does it say minimum? If you don't meet that minimum, you're not getting even considered. So if the minimum GPA for a secondary is a 3.0 and you have a 2.999, you're not getting a secondary. Don't even apply there. Don't even think about it. But if the average GPA for a secondary is a 3.0 and you have a 2.999, you are likely going to get a secondary. So you have to really look at the application language and then determine, oh, yes, I do fit this profile, or no, I don't fit this profile. But again, I put the onus on the student as well. I give information. I no longer give advice, because I want students to make their own decisions.
So if I wanted to know if a school, how would I know like what kinds of sort of research or community experience or other, because it sounds like the numbers I can figure out, right? Like I can figure out the average MCAT, I can figure out the average GPA, but like what about if I wanted to know more about the profile of like, okay, this school tends to favor more students that have, community health experiences or sort of the selfless experiences versus this school tends to be more of a research focus. Where would be the best place for me to find that information?
The mission, the values of the institution, the medical school. And sometimes you can even find it in the admissions mission. Does that make sense?
Meaning like the mission statement?
The institutional mission, the institutional values, and the admissions mission.
And so I'd find this on like the website?
What's that?
And so I'd find that on the website?
Sure. Absolutely. It should be published. If it is. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes there is no mission.
That's fair. I heard you say mistakes are costly. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see students make that are sort of the most costly in the admissions process?
Um, just throwing their hat in the ring and just hoping, you know, anybody will just accept whatever they put out there. Applying to 50 million schools and just hoping somebody will take them somewhere. I think that's a waste of money and time. Um, I also think that being unrealistic in the being not being true to themselves. You have a lousy application. You should be doing something different academically. You could be doing more. Sometimes students will call me and ask me, well, what I know I should be. I know I should have. Then why are we talking? I want to talk to you about why I didn't get in. And then when I get on the phone with them, they're like, I know I could have. Well, if you know, then why are we talking? So not being their authentic self. Some other mistakes I think, could be the interview process too, because you get all the way there, right? And some people feel like, well, if I get an interview, I'm in. That's not the case. The interview is part of the process. And so, people think, oh, I don't have to practice. I don't have to work on my interview. Yes, you do. And so I think that's another snafu that people don't think about, practicing for an interview. And you can practice for an interview. People don't think you can, but you can. And it's your application. Why don't you know the answers in your application? So yeah. Um, some other mistakes, of course, grammatical mistakes in your essay. People don't think we read personal statements, but we do. And so just make sure that you have Grammarly or something, or use your institution's writing center, things like that, to just make sure that things are accurate.
How would I prepare for an interview?
Well, since I'm giving you all of my intellectual knowledge, intellectual property, I always tell students, and this is what I just do. You want to have a Rolodex of answers, whatever they are, that can be applicable to anything that's asked from your application. I do the same thing when I'm interviewing for a job. So my Rolodex of answers are my leadership style. It's always the same. It's coaching. So if they ask about my leadership style, I always refer to coaching. If they ask about my strength, it's my leadership style, coaching. It's my Rolodex answer, right? So the same would apply for medical school. What are your Rolodex answers? So if someone says, what's the greatest clinical experience you had? You better be able to talk about it, right? And then if someone says something about, tell me about an experience that, or tell me about something that you did selflessly for someone else or whatever, you better have something that's going to be able to apply it, right? So it's having these answers that are coming out of your application, right? Because they're your experiences, they're not ours. We don't know anything about them, right? That can be applicable no matter what someone's asking you.
I see. So it's sort of like it's the universal response. It's like there's probably 20 questions I could ask you in an interview, and maybe 18 of them you could say my leadership style is coaching. Oh, that's brilliant. What would be the best way for me to come up with these Rolodex answers?
Besides practicing, um, I don't. You just have to practice. To be honest with you, Doc. Um, I- you know, I'm a, I consider myself a decent interviewer, but I also consider myself a decent test taker. And I don't think I'm the smartest person or the sharpest knife in the drawer, honestly. But I just have self-efficacy. I love myself. I believe in myself. And I just feel like, listen, you're going to get the same person today that you're going to get tomorrow. And that's it, so here I am. And so I think that the best way to get these answers is to be authentic. If this is who you are, right? And these are your experiences. And if you really are a coaching type of leader and you really believe in developing your staff and you really believe in encouraging others and you really believe in being selfless to serve the homeless and, care for sickly people, then you should be able to answer those questions. That shouldn't be a hard thing to do. And so it's just how you come off with your responses. And are you relatable? People want to be able to connect with people. I want to be able to like you. I want to be able to see that you're approachable. I want to be able to see that you're teachable, right? Because that's what attendings want to be able to know. Are you going to tell me what to do, or am I going to, are you, or are you going to be open to me telling you what to do, right? But I do like the fact that you're smart and you know what to do. Does that make sense?
I think the thread I'm hearing is know yourself,
Yeah,
love yourself,
for sure.
be yourself,
Yes.
and begin with the end in mind. Meaning, if I know all of these things and like try to find a good match between who I am, my profile, and the schools that I'm looking for. It's not just like I'm just
And the
gonna spray
answers
and
will
pray.
come. The answers will come in the interview because it's your information. See, the problem is when people are interviewing and they're trying to say what people want to hear. Say what is in your file and what's the truth. Whatever that is. If it's your truth, it is what it is. So but anyway, I digress. I love what I do because it allows me to see students grow and develop, right? Because when they usually come to me, they're like, help me be a better me, right? And so actually see them, what is it, metamorphosis into, the from the caterpillar into the butterfly. And so, it's the most rewarding job ever, believe it or not, doing admissions, because you actually see the fruits of your labor, you know, um, when a student, you meet a student, you see how much they want something, how hard they worked for something, and then they actually accomplish it. It's the most fulfilling thing, anyone could ever do. Probably more than being a physician, to be honest with you. So
I could see that. I could absolutely see that. What are the so I heard you say, the people are giving answers. One mistake that people make is that they're giving answers that they think that you want to hear.
right.
How can you tell? Like, how do you tell as an admissions professional? Like, what are you doing to sort of parse out, like, oh, they're just saying that just to say it, versus like this is their authentic self?
It's really hard. You really don't know. Um and sometimes, believe it or not, someone will think this because someone is so polished that they're faking it, right? Um and and that's not the case. And then, that just to me means they've done their homework, they've practiced, right? So unfortunately, some interviews are subjective, right? So there are institutions that implement rubrics and things like that to keep that bias out. I can't speak for any schools or anything like that, but when you do have that fair process, they're just evaluating you on your responses, right? Um, and to me, that's the fairest way to evaluate someone, you know, on 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 a rubric, opposed to a personal view being more subjective than um, non-biased or um, I guess objective. So,
Let's talk personal statements. What are the biggest mistakes that you see? Because I'm sure you read a lot. What are the biggest mistakes that you see in people's personal statements?
um, you know, for me, and again, this is very subjective because I read personal statements and I am putting my own opinion in it. But I feel that a personal statement is just that, a personal statement. I don't want to read anything about whatever's in your application. I want to know what's not in your application. So, you know, I don't want to know about your research. I do not want to know about your clinical experiences. I want to know what has motivated you to pursue medicine. And if there are some shortcomings in your application, what happened? Because a transcript can't explain that. A transcript can't tell you, my dog died and it was traumatic. You know what I mean? And so if you notice, I I tanked my sophomore year, but I got myself together and whatever. I I don't think that space should be used to tell me all the things that are already in your application. Now, if something in your application has motivated you to do medicine, then put it. So, for example, I had a student, um, I was recruiting at a school, and she was working in a lab, and, and she happened to run into me. She had no intentions of going to medical school at all. And she ran into me because I was asking her where the room was for my presentation. And we started talking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She ended up going to medical school, right? So in her essay, she talked about how she graduated from college, always wanted to do a PhD, worked in the lab after she graduated for 2 years studying X, Y, and Z, and then ran into the hallway, blah, blah. Like that was her personal statement. I get it. But I don't want to know about all those things. Does that make sense?
Like you wouldn't want to know necessarily about her research, which is in her application, but the story of like how she ran into you in the hallway and like that sparked her love of, how
Correct.
she realized
Correct.
that would be the
Correct.
subject.
Correct.
I see. So it sounds like you can use it for context if there's something that needs to be explained, like, oh, like my
If
second
it
year
brings
grades
you
were
to your
awful.
motivation, correct. But you do not need to reiterate everything that's already in your application in your personal statement.
So this is perfect. This is where I wanted to take this, which is what are the biggest misconceptions of sort of the medical school admissions process that you see?
Oh gosh, that we don't read personal statement. That's the first one. The other is that, you know, everyone is stuck on this holistic process, right? Oh, we're holistic, we're holistic, we're holistic. I want to thing of food, make a song of it, like, you know. But students have to understand the holistic process is twofold. One, some schools will give every student a secondary. The holistic process begins when you submit your secondary. Okay. For some schools, they do pre-screen. The holistic process begins if you meet the criteria for the pre-screen. So the misconception is that I'm getting a holistic review when I submit my primary application. That is not the case. The holistic review does not start for some schools until you meet the criteria for a secondary approval. Then the holistic review process begins, where they are looking at the soft skills, the other things that make you who you are. So that's one misconception. The other is that we do not read personal statements. Of course, we read them. Why would we even have them on an application? It sets you apart from everybody else. It helps us identify who you are as an individual. It helps us, um, understand your journey. Um, it's just additional information for us to know who you are. So I love personal statements. Um, the Some schools will not give you a secondary unless they're interested in interviewing you. So that's a good thing. If you get an interview and a secondary, that means if you get a secondary from some schools, that means they're going to interview you. So, you have to, again, know your schools. I know one school in particular that only gives secondaries if they interview. So, and I guess that's because there are deadlines to return money if you confirm your seat. I guess they don't want to have to return all that money. So, um, the other thing is, admissions people should tell you what you need to know in order to do well, to be a competitive candidate in their program. That is a must. And if you don't have people following up or getting back to you at institutions, shame on them, because that is what they're supposed to do. And you need to have them held accountable. And if they don't, if they do not follow up, that's only a picture of what is to come. I always tell students the face of an institution is their admissions office. Um, yeah, and participate in recruitment events. That's the other thing. Like, students don't know. We want you to meet us. We want to meet you. We want you to reach out to us and contact us. There are virtual events that we participate in. There are in-person events that we participate in. We want you to connect with. Now, me personally, I am on LinkedIn. I don't do the LinkedIn. I'm not a social media person. So if I don't reach back to you right away in LinkedIn, don't blame it on my heart. Okay? Just blame it on my head. But I'm getting better. But it's okay to reach out to us. Google me, find my information, reach out to me. I this is what we want to do. So definitely participate in recruitment events and career fairs and things of that nature.
So it sounds like for the holistic admissions process, it is holistic, but there's also minimums. And it sounds like when and how those minimums are applied will depend on the school, whether it's, sort of initially as a screen before they send a secondary or sort of after a secondary. What are the most common minimums that you see applied for sort of minimum standards for medical schools?
It really fluctuates. And I don't know if you ever get data from the AAMC, but they put out data every year, average GPA for students accepted, average MCAT score for matriculants and things like that. So the data is out there and you'll see, GPAs below 3.0, GPA between 3.0 and 3.5. So it does fluctuate. So there are some institutions, like I said, because they will give everybody a secondary without a screening process. And then it begins the screening process after you get the secondary. But there are some institutions that will say, well, if you don't have a 3.2 or 3.3 or 3.4, they'll determine their cutoff. And you need a 500 MCAT or a 505 or, a 495. Some schools even will go as low as that. That I know of for certain, as a minimum. And then, they'll review from there and determine, who will get a secondary.
For college majors, I know that you can do any major as long as you do the
Yeah,
minimums.
most students are bio majors, of course. But I always encourage students to take biochemistry, if they can, pharmacology, anatomy, physiology, if they can, histology, all the upper level bios, only because one is going to help you when you get to medical school. Two, it's going to just be something to build upon. I always tell students, if you don't take anything except for general bio 1 and 2, organic, general chemistry, general physics, you should be able to do the MCAT, right? Because it's an exam on general science, right? But what you're finding is that the MCAT is asking more questions, related to genetics. So genetics should be part of general bio now, right? But it's not, right? And so what you need to do is your due diligence, which would be taking the upper level classes. Well, sometimes you can't do it if you're not a bio major. So, if you want to major in music or dance, because I'm an artsy person too, go for it. We accept those students as well. And they're some of the best students. English majors, great. Some of the best students. But if you're going to do that, make sure that you are also taking some of these upper level classes. And if you don't get it in undergrad, you can take it at a community college. It's okay. You just need the foundation. And the reason why I say that is because the foundation is the undergraduate stuff, right? And so if you're building upon that, right, once you get to medical school, you're going to be building upon that. And you're going to keep building and building and building upon it. That's all science is. It's the same stuff. It doesn't change. It's the same, right? But you're building upon stuff. And so for young people or undergrads that are not bio majors, they don't have the opportunity to build upon because they're doing their other major and just the prerequisites. And so, if they're not building upon, they might be missing out on that genetics question that might be asked on the MCAT, or that physiology question that might be asked on the MCAT. Yeah, you can major in anything, but I do encourage students to build upon the basics.
So it sounds like bio majors have an advantage, both in terms of the MCAT, right? Some of the more sort of like genetics or sort of higher level bio kinds of questions. So advantages there. And so before they get in and afterwards as well.
I do think they do. The advantage in the sciences, but believe it or not, they do not write well. and they're not good at English and articulating things well. And I'm not a scientist or anything like that, but I've been doing this for a long time. You said 15 years. I've been doing this for more than 20. And I know what I know. And I know that.
So if I was a sort of interested in both bio and English, what would you tell me if I was, kind of open to both? What would you tell me? And I was like, I really want to get into medical school, so I
I would
will.
say major in bio and minor in English.
What about like the hard sciences, like
I don't
physics?
think there are hard sciences
Please elaborate.
because you're building upon, you know, it's like, you know, primary school, we had earth science and then geo science, where you learn about the core and all that stuff in school. And then and then you go to high school and you take chemistry, which is math, right? A lot of math, right? And then you take your physics, which is a lot of algebra, but it's also math, right? So it's building upon. And so when you go to college and you're taking those same classes, it's building upon. So even if you're taking hard sciences, you've already had the foundation. But what I tell students all the time, when you are when you go to college and you haven't done, quote unquote, or it looks like you haven't done, because I always tell students, your transcript reflects one thing, your motivation is something else. What actually happens is something different too. But when your transcript reflects that you didn't do what you were supposed to do, right? Sometimes a lot of students feel like, oh, I need to do a graduate program, right? Um, well, if you didn't have the foundation in the sciences, you're not going to be able to build upon with graduate work because you didn't do well in the basic. So sometimes it would benefit a student to do post-baccalaureate work so that they can build the foundation and continue to build upon. Now, again, it goes back to what I say as far as information. I always tell students, anyone can be a doctor. You have to put in the work, the time, the energy, the money, whatever, right? For some people, it's a straight road. For some people, it's a windy road. For some people, it's mountains and molehills. You have to determine what path you want to take. And so when a student does not have the foundation, which is the work in undergrad, and then they need to build upon that foundation with the post-bac stuff, right? For whatever reason, maybe they were an English major and they only had the prerequisite. Maybe they were a bio major and there was a lot going on at home. They couldn't focus, but they were passing and they knew, their first generation, and all they knew was that they had to finish college in 4 years. They didn't know they had to get good grades. They just knew they had to finish in 4 years. Well, now they want to go to medical school and now they have to have good grades. They didn't know that. Okay. So whatever the case may be, but they have to build upon, right? Well, for some people, you could just do the post-bac program, retake the MCAT or take the MCAT, get a great score, and go to medical school. Some may need to do a graduate program even after the post-bac program. It just depends. That's why I said excuse me, when it comes to advising students, there is no cookie cutter advisement. Each student is unique because every student's path is different. which is why I always tell students, do not compare yourself to anyone else. Your journey is your own. It is your individual path, your individual walk. It has nothing to do with anyone else's. So I can't advise you the same way I advise this person because it's like apples and oranges. So if you don't have that foundation and you don't have what you need to do well on the MCAT, then you begin building upon. If after that you don't have it, then we need to continue to build upon whatever that looks like. So, and then we have to decide if it looks like post-baccalaureate stuff or graduate work. I hope that was helpful.
Is it fair to say that so I mean, obviously,
I'm
it
all
sounds like
over the
there's no.
place, Alec. Please forgive me.
No, this is fantastic. No, this is great. This is exactly what this is. I think this is extremely valuable, very valuable feedback. I'm curious to know, would you say, like, if I have a weakness or a red flag in my application, I should address that directly as opposed to like indirectly. So in other words, if I've got low GPA, the solution to that isn't to do more research. It's to like do a post-bac, get my GPA up. You know, if
I don't know what the solution is because there's no cookie cutter. Why do you have a low GPA? First, we have to find out why you have a low GPA. Do you have a low GPA because... See, here's the thing. Some people don't know this. Some schools, right? Some big schools do not have attendance policy, right? So they grade on curves, whatever the case. Smaller schools have attendance policy. If you're absent for X amount of days, your grade drops a letter grade. So, did you get a C in the class because you were out for 10 classes in a row and you really earned an A? Or did you get a C in the class because you didn't, that's the best you could do? Why are your grades, we have to understand why your grades are low. Did you get a C in the class because you were working 40 hours a week and it was very hard for you to juggle going to school and doing labs that were required on the days after you worked till 11 and you had to be in class at 8. And so you got there at 8:30. Most of the time, lab was almost like, that's the part we have to figure out first. Once we figure why, then we come up with a plan as to how do we fix it? What's the plan to fix it? What's that part? What does that look like? Because everybody's reason for having low grades are not the same. I know, well, my grades were low. I was disco duck. But everybody's not disco duck. So it's not cut and dry. I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, you got to do this. Because that's not the answer. And whoever does that, that's not fair. And that's not right. I've had kids come to me with low grades because they had brain cancer. So you want to tell that student, oh, well, now that you've recovered, you need to do, well, I don't know. I don't know. We can't do that. That's not. Everybody's not the same.
So instead of focusing on the what, focus on the why and the how first.
First is the why. Why? Why do you have bad grades? Oh, because you pledged. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay. So you're not. Okay. Now I understand. All right. So you are smart and you know how to study. You just, okay. Now I get it. Okay. Oh, you were working. Oh, okay. So you were sending money to your disabled mom who was taking care of her mother. Okay. All right. I got it now. Okay. Now I get it. Okay. All right. All right. So let's come up with a plan. All right. All right. Does that make sense? Because now, if that is the case, are you going to still be working to send money to your mom? Because if that's the case, we got to fix that. Because you can't focus on that and do this program if this is what we're going to do. So how do we resolve that before we start doing this program? Because we can't go back. We can't do that again. Because this should make it or break it. So that's why we have to know why. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Where does your passion come from for doing this?
I don't know. The Lord. I love what I do. I don't know. It's God. I'm used as a conduit to connect the reality, the dream to the reality. I just I don't know. I come from two parents who were educators that always instilled, giving back, paying it forward. I fortunately did not come from, you know, a disadvantaged background or anything like that. But my mother was first generation. Her mother was a maid. My father was also first generation. His parents were high school graduates, in the 50s, Fonzie, Happy Days. And so both of them were first generation college grads. But, you know, I guess they instilled empathy in me and my sibling. And so we were always taught to like help others, make a difference in people's lives, get back, never settle, always help people. And so I just do what I do because I just know it's the right thing to do.
That's very inspiring. As we wrap up, what is sort of advice that is unconventional that, people don't typically hear that you have found makes the biggest difference for getting into medical school and or thriving in their career?
Well, getting into medical school takes a lot of gusto. And if you think you belong there, go for it. Um, but just make sure you're prepared. Just, seek out professionals that can actually help you, mentors. I'm 51 years old. I've been doing this for a million years, and I have a mentor that I talk to, run things by, get advice from, professional advice, personal advice, guidance, because I need it. So I definitely would encourage students to do that. The other thing is for medical students is know that you're supposed to be there. Sometimes I have students come into my office like, why did you accept me? Because you're supposed to be here. And they always feel like, they get that what is it called? Oh my gosh, it escapes me.
Imposter syndrome?
What is it?
Imposter syndrome?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And because you're so used to getting A's, you're so used to being at the top of your class, you're such, but just know that you belong and know that you are smart and know that you have self-efficacy and you can do all things. And so I think the best advice is to just believe in yourself and pay it forward, because I am a true believer in karma and dharma. Whatever you do will come back to you, and the universe is so reciprocating of your energy. So, yeah, that's my advice.
This has been fantastic. If people wanted to follow you, what would be the best way to do that?
Um, Using my Gmail account, which is M Lynn, LYNNEW at gmail.com. So Lynn W at gmail. So MLYNNEW at gmail.com.
Wow, that's fantastic. So, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of your incredible experiences. I think that my mind was blown with just how much you shared, especially around the misconceptions around, like, you know, I think that there was a lot of just, I don't think I've heard advice around, even honestly, even just like being a bio major, the advantages of being a bio major. I actually hadn't thought about, obviously MCAT kind of makes sense, but how it sets you up for medical school also I think is really, really helpful. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me. And I do want the English majors and the bio majors to know it's okay to major in anything. But, sometimes you got to make sure you get those Englishes in because you're going to have to write residency applications and essays and things like that.